Because our members have calculated, and they are saying that contribution is not going to help them. I want to say now, is the government going also to review a 3% rule? Because the pay slips of our members have now gone below a 3rd rule.
When the deductions are put without any consultations, it is clear the robbery. Now it's at 52%. What will make it not go 70% next year? What will make it not to go to 80% in 2025? And what will make it not to be that we can work for free because the country is broke and we are patriots of the country? And therefore we are demanding the government that try everything else, but try not to raid the pay slip of worker because it is non-negotiable.
All right, so passionate as they make a case for the workers they represent. One of them is from the university sector, the other one is from the doctors' union. And let's begin with the housing levy because it's contained in, should I say, is it section or clause? Section 76. It's saying that the Employment Act of 2007 is what is being amended, but that contribution from an employer and the employee, the total must not exceed 5,000 shillings, but the rate applying is 3%. Yet there are some employees that do not qualify for the affordable housing, and therefore they're given an opportunity to transfer those resources after 7 years to a retirement benefits scheme, or they can transfer their contribution to any person registered and eligible for the affordable housing program. They may also transfer their contributions to their spouse or dependent children. They may also receive their contributions in cash, and once they do that, those contributions will also be taxed based on the rate that will be applying in the year that they are withdrawing their resources, of course, maturing after 7 years. Honorable Wandeto, what sense does this make, especially if you talk about everyone is contributing to the housing levy, but not everyone is benefiting? What is the idea here?
Well, the idea here is to create this large pool of resources against which we can draw to, for purposes of affordable housing. And some, like you have said clearly, this is up to a maximum of 5,000. It's very important that we emphasize that because, for people, like these honorable members of parliament, the percentage may look like it's much higher if they calculate it, but it is being capped at 5,000 for both the employer and the employee, which means it's 2,500 for the employer and 2,500, for the employee. And for me, this is a noble idea. And some what I said from the onset is what we possibly now need to debate more is how can we ensure that this fund is then prudently used to ensure that nearly every Kenyan, because again, it doesn't make sense to tax me and I am outside the bracket of affordable housing. So for me, I think that is something maybe we need to look at. We have to look at how we bring every Kenyan on board, even this Kenyan who is earning, 20,000 or 30,000. How do we ensure that they can also be able to benefit? And even the guy earning a lot of money, because again, you do not want to contribute, and from the onset, clearly you are contributing to something that you cannot benefit from. So I would suggest that...
How do you make him benefit? I mean, if for instance, yourself, I presume you have somewhere you live with your family.
Yes.
Why would you need affordable housing?
Well, I could because I'm contributing and I may want to put it as an investment, for example. Okay? So what I'm just saying in principle
then that defeats the logic because you're constructing houses for those that cannot afford the housing.
Or do we then
not investing for you?
Or do we then expand this so that it is not just about affordable housing, it's about housing. So that if I contribute more, I can get a house that is commensurate to what I think should be a house of my status. But my point here is that we ensure that as many people, we make it as inclusive as possible. And I'm not even too worried about the higher end people. I am worried about the lower end people who may contribute, and maybe the limits or the cutoffs that may be put, may put them out of this. Because remember, this is a long-term investment. It is not something that they can draw out tomorrow, and it is something that will be, they'll be contributing for a long time. So what I would suggest, that we do with affordable housing is to make it as inclusive as possible. And again, like we have said, Sam, These are proposals. Let them come in the public. Let us debate. Let us have a robust conversation around how we want to attack this issue of affordable housing. Because what we agree on this table is that indeed it is something necessary, and indeed it is something for which we have a huge problem. Now, how we tackle it, let us put it on the table and let us debate it. But I would say let us make it as inclusive as possible.
Honorable Cheng, is there a way of making it inclusive? Because I'm just making some simple calculation. 5,000 shillings every month for 7 years will be 420,000. That after 7 years, if I don't want to opt in, I can decide to withdraw my resources. But subjected to tax, maybe that time it will be 30% or whatever it is. Is there a way of debating it, or is it just a bad idea?
No, I don't think it's a bad idea, really. It's a good idea in the sense that, you want to spur growth through affordable housing. And I wanted, if you can give me some time to explain this clearly, that the idea here is double-pronged. One, let's get this pool of resources that can be tapped upon for housing. And then two, structure the housing program in a manner, the housing construction program in a manner that creates jobs. What we've been presented with in Parliament and as a policy proposal is a whole chain-based program that starts from training artisans, guys who do the windows and the doors and the hinges and the padlocks and all this, that construction of housing from this fund would be handled that way. That we want a pool of resources that we can say we're going to do housing, but that would spur growth of jobs and employment at the level of artisanry. Now, this for me is not a mandatory thing. It's a proposal that's being made by government that this is how we wish to raise resources for housing. Okay. Number two, the gentleman there who spoke, by the way, may have said something that is laughable, but it's really what it is. The Honorable Oluoch talks about debt. How do you freeze debt? How do you reduce debt? And I believe that having a fund like the Housing Fund is going to help this country reduce external debt. Because if you agree on whatever percent you agree on, 2%, 3%, and there's a pool of resources, when the Housing Fund doesn't need it, we can borrow from there for the rest of what we want to do as a country. Let's not shy away from saving some of these things. This is part of what we want to do. Part of the monies we want to raise through NSSF and this Housing Fund is to enable us to have a pool, get a culture of saving and borrowing within the country. This has to be understood very well. It's just not housing per se, but it's also having a pool of resources available to be borrowed from by government with a return at the end of the day. And what I probably think we need to have in the laws is what kind of return should we expect, not just say the return on the fund. We should not say what percentages are we looking at. Number three is what I said when we started. At some level, Kenyans who earn well must be willing to support Kenyans who don't earn well. Those of us who have houses and who don't need or who don't qualify for this housing should be willing to fund the construction and the growth of affordable, decent housing for those who can't afford it. This is the idea. So that we...
How do you express willingness in a finance bill?
Through representation. Members of Parliament. It's as simple as that. Members of Parliament will sit and agree that as we believe we want to commit our constituents on this. It's as simple as that, Sam.
And if the idea is to create this pool of resources where the government can borrow, why not say it? Because now you put it mandatory, you're even forcing employers to contribute. That's an additional cost on the employees.
You know, the reason of law normally, Sam, is to compel. If we asked you today to pay PAE, if you were asked, are you willing to pay? Everyone will say they won't pay. And so part of the reason laws are made is to compel. If you give somebody a choice on this kind of a matter, and the point is this, part of why you go to elections is to elect a government which comes to government with a proposal or a plan or a policy statement or whatever it is that you want to call a manifesto. It sells that manifesto. If it's able to get the manifesto going through, it governs using that manifesto. And that's why I can't emphasize this more. Where a finance bill is concerned, in my opinion, it's about all those of us who are here today, representing our constituents and feeling their pulse. Is this something that they're going to, is this something that appeal that they can swallow or not? Personally, I believe that we must get a culture of saving in this country. We must get a culture of ensuring that we have resources within the country to avoid what we are facing now. Part of why, for example, salaries are not being paid on time is that we are paying debt, huge debts. There's a time when the Eurobond became due last month. You saw, even as in Parliament, we see our salaries 3, 4, 5 days later. Reason is that we're not able to raise monies locally to deal with our things. We are not living within our means. And somehow we must be found to ensure that we live within our means.
That's interesting. Don't you think it's insensitive? I mean, look at inflation. Well, it's slowing down a little bit, but it's been quite high. The cost of living has gone high. Then you still keep going back to the pay slip with the same demands?
My issue really on this issue, Sam, is the manner in which it's being sold. I think we need to engage Kenyans more. Tell them, why do we want to reduce the housing fund? And be honest with them. And ask them whether they're going to be able to swallow this pill. For me, that is the only issue I have on this. In terms of whether we need to have a housing fund or not, I am positive we need a housing fund. But we need to have a discussion with Kenyans that this is what we want to do with the housing fund. Do you agree? Do you not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Honorable Mbui, the reasoning behind the housing fund and the explanation you'll find on that section 76 of the Finance Bill, how do you, what is the question? How do you make it make sense?
You know, Sam, the real issue here is that this government is trying to borrow from the hustlers who work in this country. That's a bottom line. Because if you look at the import of raising the savings in NSSF, it's not for them when they are, you know, when they've retired. It's so that there is more money that the government can be able to tap into. And even this National Housing Development Fund, the real idea is to increase, you know, create a pool. So you charge you tax the employee 3%, the employer 3%, just like in NSSF, and then all that money now becomes available for government to borrow for its own functions. I mean, some it's like you are an employer, and then you take money from your employees and tell them you're keeping it for them so that you can use that money to run your own programs. But sometimes the employees have problems that are, you know, immediate, like in the case of the period within which we are discussing this bill. Kenyans are grappling with high cost of living. Kenyans are grappling with hunger. Kenyans are grappling with issues of fees. Children are going to school today, maybe even 50% will not have paid their full fees. In fact, not even 50%. So we really have a problem. But I just wanted to say that if you look at the totality of what is happening within the taxation, it means that an average Kenyan who is employed will work for 1 year, but will only be paid for 6 months, because the government will take 6 months of his pay as taxation. That is the bottom line. And I agree with Oluoch when he says that we must look at a way by which we can allow our workers to be able to take home the money they have worked for. Because it's unfair for a government to take 50% of anyone's earnings. It's really immoral. It's totally unacceptable. And some, you know, I just want to point out this thing of 35% on pay as you earn. Yes, we may say that it is on people that earn $500,000 and above. But I think we may be the first country that is taxing employees more than business people. Because our income tax is actually capped at 30%. How then do you charge the employees 35%? What logic is that? How can you charge an employee more than what you would charge even the profit that their boss would make? So it's totally unacceptable, and I think this is really wrong. And let me just point out that Honorable Ochieng has talked about the issue that, you know, the KRA, you know, in the bill, they have talked about how they will do capacity building. Honestly, that is not even an issue of legislation. I've seen it, it's in the bill, but it's not an issue for legislation. Who stopped KRA from doing training? Nobody has ever stopped KRA from spending their money on capacity building their staff, or even because they talk about, you know, training, you know, business people on issues to do with tax. That has always been done. That has always existed. I think some things are being put in this bill to confuse us. Let's look at the taxation, not the money, not that they will spend some of the money, I don't know, to train who. That is not fair. And then again, I just want to ask that Kenya Kwanza now, wants to charge us more in taxation. But the Deputy President told us that this is a country that is a company of shareholders. And I am certainly not one of the shareholders. So why should I pay more tax?
Okay. I think that's a question to
I think
Deputy President.
I think on that one, Robert is totally out of order.
No, please note it down.
Yes.
Just listen to.
And I think you should not be allowed to get away with that. Yeah.
Listen to what the president. But actually, he
said that.
He actually
said that.
Clarified and said that he meant the government, not the country.
I hope we can discuss that.
Exactly.
Let's listen to what the president said about housing levy.
Kuna housing fund ambayo tunataka kila Mkenya a contribute pesa kidogo, 3% of your income, 3% of your salary. Kama unapata shilingi 10,000, 3% ni shilingi 300 kila mwezi, uweke katika hiyo hazina. Pale mbele tutakusaidia vile utanunua nyumba. Tutaanza kama serikali, all employees of government, wale wafanyikazi wetu ambao tuko nao karibu 1700. Kila mfanyikazi wa serikali ambaye atatoa sehemu ya mshahara yake 3% kwa mambo ya housing, na sisi kama serikali tutampatia 3% every month ya salary yake, so that we can create a fund that will assist the people of Kenya to acquire homes.
Now, Honorable Oluoch, yes. I need to stop calling you Ching. Honorable Oluoch, so that's the president. It's a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about wataanza na wafanyakazi wa umma in the public sector, public service, if you may call it. But now the finance bill is to everyone with a salary. Is it possible to apply a policy just within the public sector, leaving out the private sector? But secondly, even as you do that, how do you justify making a contribution in the housing fund, and I don't think it is deducted before tax, so meaning it's after tax, but when you're taking away your benefit 7 years later, it will be taxed? Isn't that double taxation?
Yes, it is true, and really that's part of what I said at the very beginning, is that we must go back to the basic as to why are we taxing people? Why are we taxing people? And I think the Kenya Kwanza government needs to explain to people, is it that they are trying to bring in affordable housing, or do they want to create a pool from which to borrow? I think they are mixing up two things. They're mixing up two things, and if they want to say that they're creating affordable housing so that they have a pool to borrow, we must go back to the question that good practice demands that government should stay out of borrowing locally. But now they're trying to innovate, staying out of borrowing locally, but they're borrowing from the common mwananchi. I think this is something that we need to call them out for. The second question is, have we exploited other means by which we can be able to get affordable housing? And I think there are other means. And this is why this thing must be robustly debated. There is public-private partnerships. How far have we gone with this? Why can we not engage people who are involved, like retirement benefits, people, and tell them, you know, invest the money that you keep for people up to 65 years or 60 years and do for us housing. Do some kind of arrangement, public-private arrangements, and then make this affordable to people. But you cannot say we want to create affordable housing, but you're going into people who are already overburdened, overtaxed, to get money in order to which to achieve the affordable housing. My last point of this is on chapter 15 of the Constitution, which talks about prudent use of financial resources. Now, this chapter of the Constitution provides that you must use in a prudent manner money that is public and money that you get from the public. So the question here that we must ask the government to explain is that in trying to tax people, an ordinary employee, out of their meager resources, is that prudent use of financial resources that is available for people, whether you're getting it from the public or you're getting it from the private. And then lastly, to your question, Whether you can create a law to say this is housing levy to public watu wa umma vis-a-vis people in the private. How can you legislate for me who is not an employee earning from government on how I should use my money, what I earn? What if housing is not my priority? What if something else is? How do you create a law? For me who does my juakali things and decides how I make my money, and then you make a law to say I must use that money in order to help you, the government, to create affordable housing. I think we have our priorities wrong in that respect.
Please answer me that question, because you're a certified public accountant.
Yes.
Isn't that double taxation? Take away housing levy, but tax the benefits or the withdrawal 7 years later?
Okay. What is the purpose of the housing levy? It is to enable you get a house, okay? So, and if you withdraw your benefit, and this is not just about the housing levy, you know, it happens also with a lot of the pension schemes, that if you withdraw earlier than maybe the stated, a period, or which is basically your retirement, your withdrawal attracts, taxation. So it is not really double taxation, because the purpose for which you are putting this money was actually to get an affordable house. And if the money goes to a house, then it is not subject to tax. But if you want to, if you actually transfer it to another beneficiary, or if you want to move it then to a retirement benefit scheme, it is all, you are saved from taxation. But if you feel that your savings now in 7 years, basically you have got you want them back in cash, at least it's actually a very, very common finance practice. That
even if it was subjected to taxation at the initial deduction?
Exactly.
I want to say something on that, Sam.
Right.
That one, let's look at the principle. The principle is that we want to discourage cash withdrawals from the fund. Assuming we set it up, the reason they're proposing to tax it, then...
No, but just hold on. But the same bill is talking about that there are people that do not qualify for affordable housing. And so one of the options is to withdraw.
No, I agree. I'm just, that's what I'm trying to explain to you. That if you look at the provisions there, they're encouraging a couple of things. One, that instead of getting your money out, put it in a retirement scheme. Or they're encouraging intergenerational ownership, so that I can pass my shares or my contribution to my son can pass it to their daughter if they have, so that people, my son maybe would qualify in the housing fund. So this is how they're doing it. And at the end of the day, they're saying that if you want to withdraw, we'll discourage you from withdrawing by taxing it. It could be wrong in my opinion. We could discourage it. What should be taxed should be the income on what you contribute, but not on the contribution. That's what I believe should be the law. Yeah.
Honorable Wandeto, because look, contributions to NSSF,
yes,
they're exempted from taxation.
Yes,
they're actually deducted before taxation.
Yeah.
And so if at the point of taking out the benefit it's taxed, then that's taxation once.
Yeah.
Does you think there's something there?
I think some, based on what yourself and David here are discussing, and this is maybe something we can look at. Do we want the housing fund, which is also like a savings, social security savings scheme? Do we want to debate it and say it should be tax exempt? I think that is something we could.
That's the point. Yeah, that's the point.
That is something that we could discuss, and I think what you're making is a very, very good point, because this is a long term. Yeah. This is a long-term savings, yeah? Or do we want some portions of it, even if it's on a graduated scale, you get some sort of like a housing tax relief back. The same way today we get insurance relief or mortgage relief or whatever. Right. I think there must be something there we need to discuss. There is something that is not adding up there, and maybe it is something for the finance committee to basically see whether it could be considered, especially when we go to public participation. But it makes perfect sense what you are saying, so that we also encourage more people to see sense in making these savings. But yes, I agree on the early withdrawal. Again, we could debate. Is it to discourage people? Is it to tax all of it? Is to tax a portion of it? Is it to tax the income? And there is some discussion. But again, this is a new levy. Let the bill come to Parliament. Let us go for public memoranda, and let us see how do we especially ensure that this works for Kenyan, because it is something totally new in our taxation.
So,
all right, yes, Honorable.
Some, if you could allow me, because we all heard the President's comment when he said that if you earn 10,000, then you'll be taxed at the rate of 3%. That's only 300 shillings. And maybe I just want to point out that you know, that is a kind of you know, feel-good comments that this Kenya Kwanza regime is very good at, because I want to lay bare the facts. If you earn 10,000 shillings and you're paying 300 shillings in a month, assuming that you're to be to qualify for the affordable housing project, I mean, the small house would probably be about 1 million shillings. Now, that means that you'd have to be paying 300 shillings, because that's what you can afford, for 277 years. So that means these people will never qualify for any affordable houses. They will never be the beneficiaries. Maybe, and then you look at, that's a lower spectrum, because those are the hustlers that are being told you will benefit. They will not. Now look at the high-income earners. High-income earners are not interested in the first place, because Honorable Wandeto here has just mentioned he's already got a comfortable house. He doesn't want to go and get a house of 1 million. He probably will live in a house of 50, 60 million, or even 100 million. So for me, I think this is something that needs a lot of discussion, because the high end do not want it. The low cadre who are being told that it will benefit them, it will never benefit them. So I think this is something for maybe the middle class, who can be allowed to organize themselves and take mortgages from banks, so that we can even support our financial institutions and stop robbing the workers of this country.
No, the 10,000 I think was hypothetical, one. And number two,
right,
is that, I mean, if you look at how this fund is going to be structured, it is not conceived that everyone will benefit from it. There's a class of people who want to own houses. Say, for example, you build 1,000 houses in Siaya, where I come from. And there are these people who, like my parents were teachers, they can afford to pay 2,000 shillings a month. Those are the kind of people that we are targeting in
the 10,000
Let's talk
about that one.
This
the one the President mentioned.
That was hypothetical. He was giving an example of if you're earning this.
So let's talk about that.
If you're earning this, this is what you're going to pay.
So was he lying to Kenyans?
He wasn't lying. It's hypothetical.
So tell us how a 10,000 earner will own an affordable house.
And I think the other thing we need to ask here is, sorry, Honorable Ochieng, is that who's going to build these houses, over what period? If I'm an employee and I'm being deducted X amount of money, after how many years do I have that house?
That's what I was
Do I get it when I'm already retired and I want to retire to go home, so that I'm investing to get a house, maybe to pass on to my child? We need to look at, in terms of practicality, how affordable, how am I going to have the benefit and use of this house? And after how long?
This house, the way it's structured, this house should be available as soon as they are constructed. Say next year we got one constructed, it's balloted for immediately. Even if you could only for 1 month, you are qualified to get it.
But you're not answering another question here.
And the issue in terms of the construction, from what we've seen and what we've seen with the police statement, is that these are going to be PPPs, as you suggested earlier, where someone comes with the resources, the government adds more, or government just gets contractors to construct the houses 100% owned by government, and therefore government basically underwrites. You as a contractor, you're told, we want these 1,000 houses. Here is the money, construct it, we'll pay you as you construct. You finish paying, you go home, you give government the keys, the government ballots for the house and gives the person who wants to get the house.
But the person who gets a house must be able to afford to pay for it fully.
That's the point.
So a 10,000 earner, how would they afford that house? Or even a 20,000 earner?
That
important.
I think, Robert,
maybe one of you can explain.
Just hold on. I think there's a substantive questions he's raising, because, well, the minimum wage is not 10,000, it's slightly higher than that.
Yeah.
But there are people that may never really raise that money in the lifetime of their working through that contribution of 10%. How do you see
that's why the law talks about multi-generational. That if I don't finish paying, my son or my daughter who will take over the house is allowed to continue paying what I was paying. It doesn't end at my death or at the point of time when I cannot be able to pay. That's what the law says.
I want us to transition to the other conversation about the National Health Insurance Fund. It is not part of the finance bill, but it is part of regulations of 2023 that suggest that the rate of contribution should rise to 2.75%. It appears that it's not capped. Currently 1.7%, but it's capped at 1,700 shillings maximum. Let's listen to what the President had to say about that.
Niliwaambia haiwezekani kwamba mimi rais nalipa shilingi 1,700 kila mwezi, na mama mboga na mtu ya bodaboda analipa shilingi 500 ili akuwe na kadi ya NHIF. Mimi mshahara yangu ni 1,000,000. Yule bodaboda mapato yake ni 5,000. Kuna ungwana pale kweli?
All right, and shortly we'll be looking at what that means to persons earning differently, all the way from as low as some 12,000 shillings. If we can take a look at that, it will be interesting to see. First of all, well, that's the rate, 2.75% of the gross pay. The self-employed will also raise 2.75% of gross income. The minimum contribution is 300 shillings, down from 500 shillings. Those unemployed to pay 1,000 shillings per month. That's important. Those unemployed to pay 1,000 shillings per month. So this is just an indication of what that would mean. If your salary is 12,000 shillings, you currently pay 500 shillings to NHIF. That you decline or reduce to 330 shillings. If you earn 40,000 shillings, you currently pay 1,000. You now start paying 1,100 shillings. If yours is 80,000, you see how the rate goes. For 100,000, which has been the maximum contribution at 1,700, now to go to 2,750. If you earn $1 million, then your current contribution is 1,700. It will go up to 27,500 shillings, and you can calculate for yourself 2.75% multiplied by your gross salary monthly. And the idea here is to have more resources available to be deployed in the universal health coverage. Again, Honorable Oloch, let me start with you, because there has been this conversation about universal health coverage since President Kenyatta started his second term, late 2017. There was a pilot that was conducted in 6 counties. It was supposed to be now extended to the rest of the country. But there are still challenges. If you go to hospitals, the services still wanting. Sometimes the medical supplies are not sufficient. You don't have enough medical professionals, specialists not there. Are we dealing with the right problem here?
I think we need to carry a big forensic audit over whether or not this thing called universal health coverage is actually attainable within the structures that we have. I think that's a conversation that we have to first look at in terms of, one, health is a devolved function. Yeah, we have had all these issues about whether or not counties have been able to take up this and whether or not this should revert to national government. There's a question of corruption. Even the drugs that are put in the dispensary or some of these hospitals, whether or not they actually end up staying on those shelves or get into private hands. I think we may need to get into deep discussion as to whether or not we are ready to take up this thing called universal health coverage, or whether we need to pilot it. I think myself it is something that we need to do in stages and take it up in terms of either county by county or a certain section of the population. But I think as it is right now, using these regulations, which themselves I doubt have come to Parliament in terms of, and you know we have discussed this in the House and Rules Procedure Committee, the practice where government agencies bring up regulations, some of which end up very punitive, and in this case, a 2.5% levy being put on our employees, without necessarily having recourse to Article 94.5, which says that Parliament must have its stamp on authority on anything that has the force of law. I think this is one that we need to recall and bring back to Parliament so that we are able to look at in terms of, before we put this levy and raise these resources through some kind of taxation, do we have the structures, or will this end up being another Ponzi scheme? I think we need to have this discussion and evaluation before we can allow a rollout of this so-called universal health.
Honorable Mbui, your thoughts around this, especially on, yes, there's a gap in terms of the resources that are available for delivering quality health care. But there are also the gaps that Kenyans have faced. Those that contribute to the NHIF, they do not necessarily have the best of experience dealing with it.
Yeah, let me begin first by pointing out that a lot of Kenyans and a lot of even state departments, have been complaining and raised very pertinent issues on the management of NHIF. I mean, even as private employers, your employees would go to NHIF. You've been making contributions,
right.
And then when at the point of need, they go to this hospital and they are told that their contributions have not been updated. And that is because NHIF is constantly at having a backlog of sorting out its I think softwares and updating its records. In fact, many times employees will be sent back to the employer to get a letter confirming that their payments have been made. So that means they have a very poor work ethics. And when you introduce an increase in the amount of money that is being paid to such an organization, for me it's unfortunate, but I will say that we are to blame because I don't want to put blame on one specific person. We passed the NHIF Act 2022, which unfortunately allows the board with concurrence with the CS the right to set the amount of money contributed, and there's no maximum limit. Previously there was it was capped at 1,700. Right. Now whatever amount you earn, if you earn $1 million, you pay 2.75% of that. I think that's an unfortunate situation. I think we need to go and amend the NHIF Act so that we can put specific figures and contain this situation so that it doesn't go overboard. And let me say, if that person that organization that has not been able to use a little money prudently, and the kind of scandals we've had with NHIF, why would you want to give them so much more? I think for me, the limit, the maximum limit has to be decided by Parliament and determined and set so that we do not allow an open-ended situation where they can charge whatever they want. And that means even tomorrow, the CS can decide now we want to push it to 10%. I mean, and then we'll be working, backwards. So I think it's important that as Parliament we amend it so that we set the limits ourselves.
Okay, interesting. And Honorable Wandeto, again on that question about what the government wants to deliver on the universal health coverage. This has not been successful previously, and it's the same. It is similar to the experiment of President Kenyatta with the housing levy in his second term. So how do you convince Kenyans who are making all these contributions so that, because at the end of the day, you look at your payslip and these are all deductions, regardless of how you utilize them.
Exactly.
So how do you move that conversation, especially if you have to look at the situation in Nyeri County, what people struggle with in terms of the conditions, maybe some non-communicable diseases versus the kind of quality they access at health facilities. And is NHIF going to be the solution by raising the contributions?
Thank you, Sam. And I think where I agree with Anthony and Robert here is that if this whole scheme will become a success, we have to institute very serious reforms in NHIF. Mm-hmm. I think that one nobody disagrees. NHIF, I happen to be in the audit committee that looks at the books of NHIF, and I've had a number of encounters with them. And what you see is an organization that is really in need of reforms. Right now, as we speak within NHIF, nearly all the managers are acting. As we contemplate this fund, we have to move very, very fast to reform NHIF, to strengthen NHIF, because we have many issues that we hear. We have even heard of situations whereby NHIF cards are being used to buy sugar and rice. And
are they?
Yes.
How?
Because you can register a health facility, but you are not necessarily offering health services. Part of corruption.
Is that possible?
It is possible.
Where is it happening?
It is possible. We've had. That is a story for another day.
No, that's interesting because I know enough Kenyans who want to do that.
It is. I mean, I can say that...
you don't need claim forms?
No, you may, but you see, it can be written aspirin, but what you got was not aspirin. So there is need to actually reform NHIF if it has to deliver the mandate. So that is something we agree on. And because we would like some to move to a situation whereby once you are contributing this money to NHIF, the 2.75%, you don't even feel the need to take another medical insurance. Because today, a lot of Kenyans contribute to NHIF, but companies and even government itself is still running very expensive medical insurance schemes.
Right.
For teachers, for police, for civil servants. You know, they are all insured by some of these private companies. NHIF has won some tenders in the past, lost them. I think now is won back. For some sectors or the whatever. But how do we ensure that if I contribute the 2.75% today, I can do away with my private medical insurance, because I am 100% sure that the care that I'm going to get in case I fall ill, one, sufficiently covers me in terms of the limits that have been put,
right.
And two, that I can, get, good and quality, health care. So that is one thing that I think, even as we discuss whether it should be 2.75%, it should be 2%, strengthening NHIF is very, very important. And just to update, Anthony here, the pilot for UHC was already done. I think it was Nyeri, Kisumu, and 2 other counties.
Machakos.
And Machakos, yeah. And,
right.
The learnings have been picked. And I believe the learnings have then informed that NHIF was generally, underfunded. And that, some of the things we were seeking to have it to do, the funds will not be enough. But even now with the new additional funds, right. If we do not have efficient utilization of resources, more resources may not necessarily translate into better healthcare, for Kenyans. So that's how I would like, to approach this thing.
I want us to take a look at
something on NHIF.
Just hold on. I'm not moving away from that. I'm just looking at a model payslip to give us the impact of the changes that are being proposed, what that would mean. If your salary, this is, of course, the contributions. If your salary is 100,000 shillings, currently your NSSF is 1,080 shillings. Your pay as you earn 21,804 shillings. The NHIF is currently 1,700. It is likely to go up to 2,750. Housing levy currently contributes 0. It's suggested to go to 3%. That would be 3,000, but remember the maximum is 5,000, so that could be 2,500 shillings. And the total deductions would change from 24,585 to 28,635. If you had to add back the 500 shillings, then you'll be talking about 29,135. And obviously, that's how your net pay would change. And the story is different for different people based on how much they're making every month. Honorable Ochieng, so then all this ideally is geared towards looking for solutions, delivering on the promises. But what must we do to make sure that we get it right, even if you're now to even focus on the key challenges that your constituents face in accessing proper health care?
One, I will abolish NHIF totally. We don't need it. We need a national health service that takes care of everybody. It's just inconceivable that the 4 of us who are sitting here, we pay that 1,700.
We don't use it.
We don't use it because behind us is a very generous insurance scheme. So why should you even want to reform it? Make every public servant an NHIF person if you're going to retain it. But what I mean here to say is that have universal healthcare and ensure that everybody who works for government goes for it. Even if it's going for health service abroad, it has to be through some protocols so that all of us are able to get our medical needs met here. Remember that I just told you. The police, 1 billion. Us in Parliament, 345 million a year to a private medical scheme. And if you can go on and on, it's almost 8, 15, 16 billion from government coffers, going away from NHIF, being paid privately, in some cases where we don't need it. So what we need today in Kenya is not an insurance fund. We need a national health service like the one you have in Britain that takes care of everybody, so that if you make a contribution, you know that I will get these services whenever I need them.
How would we finance it?
The same way you get money from people, but you don't put in a fund. Like what we have in NHIF Day, where you have bands. There's this hospital in Kawangware, there's this hospital in Ugenya that has to apply, then it gets accredited, then you find that his hospital gets paid 10 million shillings in a month, mine gets paid 1 million shillings in a month without any serious criteria being used. The fund, the way it's currently being run, cannot help us transition into a serious universal health system regime. We need to abolish it and look at the principles and ethos of establishing a working national health service, universal health scheme that doesn't require us to even have a fund the way it is today. If you look at the way that kind of money that's being used to manage that fund, the governmental agencies in it, the patronage, the tribalism in running it, it's basically a scheme that is dead, using very poor taxpayers' money to run something that should not be run. Number two, I agree with Honorable Mbui. We must put a cap. Like, why have we put a cap on housing at 5,000 shillings? There's a reason. So even on this one, you must put a cap. If you want to raise it, yes, it is 700. Can we multiply it by 3 or by 4 and say that is contributed 10,000 shillings? And then we prorate it and ensure that guys who are the lowest ebb are able to pay even 600 shillings or 500, continue paying what they are paying now. But some of us who are able to pay 10,000 can pay 10,000 at the max. Because I don't believe that you should graduate a health contribution scheme based on how much I earn. That you put a percentage to it. No, it is never done anywhere. So there are conversations we must have to ensure that our health scheme is not about money. Some in this country today, the issue about health is not lack of money. It is corruption and service delivery. We are one country that has the highest prices for medicines and drugs. We are one country that every doctor orders a test. If I go to Mbuya today and I have a broken arm, I will order an X-ray. Tomorrow I go to Oluwachi, wants a new X-ray. You don't want to use the one I had yesterday. Why? And it is all over the place. So our issue about health is not money. It's about how we manage the health system totally. At every referral level, you have to do a number of tests. Some of the tests we are ordering are not even necessary. Oh, MRI here, CT scan there. Things that sometimes you ask yourself, why are they being done? And so we need, if you're talking about NHIF, I believe, and I think there's a way in which we sometimes force things for no reason at all. We need to have a conversation about universal health scheme. Uhuru Kenyatta, for example, did this thing you're talking about, the
pilot.
The piloting. Let me tell you, that piloting thing was a disaster. It can't give you, I was sitting in the health committee at that time, it can't give you any lessons learned because monies were being sent to the counties without any plan on how this is going to be done. And the only indicator was how much was sent to the counties. Not how much service was received, not quality of service received. No, it was how much was sent to the counties. I mean, one thing problem we have in this country today, and I'm happy about how we're dealing with the housing scheme, is that we have an idea today and we want to launch it tomorrow.
Right.
You don't want to sequence, you don't want to have a debate on it, you don't want to ask experts to think about how best to deal with this situation. And I'm hoping that in this regime of Kenya Kwanza, we'll get used to consultations, getting expert opinion, and leading, using government money based on evidence. On this NHIF issue, we need actuaries to tell us how much you need on every Kenyan at their level to spend on every Kenyan for health provision, so that we invest with information and statistics that bail us out, not just quantities, but not quality.
Sam, I think the other thing, before you close this issue...
I'm not closing. I just wanted to refer to something here. Yes. So the NHIF on its website has indicated that they are expecting feedback from Kenyans by 11th of May 2023, 5 p.m. 11th of May, today is 8th, so it's in the next 3 days for Kenyans to express themselves. But I'm also wondering, even as you give me that feedback, I'm wondering, because he has raised an important issue that you should not graduate, or you should not charge people NHIF deductions based on their salary. And where does equality and equity apply? Because on taxation, he agrees that those high-income earners can be charged a maximum of 35 instead of 30. But also, obviously, if you look at the scale, it takes care of that. But if you fall ill, you maybe you have an injury or you have a headache, it is headache whether you earn high or not. So when you go to hospital, there's no separation of the situation you're exhibiting.
Exactly. We have we have some kind of inequity or inequality there that needs to be looked at. And I think what we need to consider is whether or not we want to completely collapse the whole idea of making private health lucrative as it is. And I want to link it up with the issue he has raised. You know, Sam, our insurance is actually going to be budgeted in this budget. It is not deductible. When I look at my payslip, there is no deduction on the government money that is put on my insurance. And I can now go to Nairobi Hospital. Some people would go on certain ailments overseas. So if you put together all this, has somebody audited and said how much is put into the police service for private insurance? There is the civil service. There is the teachers. All this consolidated runs into how many billions? And what if you took this money before you actually put this levy on the NHIF, so-called universal health care, consolidate it and provide public health accessible equitably to everybody, which then means if I have a headache, that headache should be treatable with the same facility, same hospitals as somebody from Mathare constituency, so that it will not depend on my ability to have paid more. Yeah, so I pay more, therefore the universal health care that I will get is better than somebody who's probably not working. I think we need to audit how much of this money that is going to go to this year's budget ends up going into private health institutions, and bring it back. Take all that money, put it into public health. Then let anybody who nevertheless still wants to go to private use their money, not public money. Let me use my money to go to Nairobi Hospital, not money that the government, coming from taxpayers, funds Ochieng and myself and Mbui and Mheshimiwa from Tetu here to go to better institution at the expense of the ordinary Kenyan.
And you see, Sam.
So as you give me your answer, let me ask you this, because we pay taxes. These taxes are supposed to provide services to the people. So when you pay tax, but it's not sufficient to pay your school fees, especially because of what has just happened to a change of model financing higher education, that tax is not sufficient to build roads or to build dams, because now you're moving to public-private partnership. It is not sufficient to build houses because you're moving to the housing levy. So why are you paying tax?
Sam, that's a good one. And I think as a country, obviously, you know that for a long time we've run a budget deficits, which is simply to say our expenditure versus our income, you know, we have a shortfall. And that's why we either borrow locally or internationally. The Kenya Kwanza government, you know, has been very, very keen on reducing the budget deficit. There is even targets this year, I think, to take it to 6.25% or something like that. And so that is where we are coming from a taxation point of view. And but the answer to that is not necessarily to say, let's tax people more and more and more so that we can reduce the deficit. And I start from, and I mean, I'll end where I started, where I said, it's not even so much about the amount of tax that people pay, but what do people get for the taxes that they do pay. So some of the issues that we are discussing here, for example, a person earning $1 million shillings, to use the example, would be paying for NHIF something like 27,500 a month. Now, per year, that's nearly 300K, 300,000. An insurance policy of 300,000 a year is a very good insurance policy. I think it will give you, you know, some fairly good benefits. I think maybe something like 5 million inpatient, 1 million shillings out, or 100,000 shillings outpatient, and so on and so forth. So it's just to show that if we can have prudent use of these levies that actually we want to raise in this government, we can be able to cushion our people from all these other out-of-pocket expenses that they are having to pay for their own medical insurance, to some expensive pension schemes, to basically secure their old age, and even to some expensive mortgages. So it is up to the government, and this is what now we must even engage in more deeply. How do we ensure that we are a very efficient user of these resources that we are raising from Kenyans, so that they can be able to see that there is something in it for them? After paying these taxes, my children are getting quality education at a lower price. I am having free public transportation. I am having free healthcare, etc., etc.
And I think this is a collective memorandum to the Finance Committee and also to the NHIF as they get to discuss the progress of this. I want us to quickly take a look at the feedback that has come to us at Sam Gituku at Citizen TV. The hashtag to use is daybreak on your views and concerns. Engineer Lazaro, increasing taxes to already exhausted workers is punitive. Ill-advised move. President Ruto should sit down with economic experts to look for other workable alternatives. Magwa, Ruto's proposals to increase taxation on NSSF, NHIF, Housing Fund is an ill-advised move in this period when especially the country is facing economic hardship and majority of Kenyans are suffering, putting in mind that the government refused to increase salaries. Honorable Lillian Sioi, government generates revenue through taxes to be able to finance so many things. Widening the tax net could mean ensuring that those who are supposed to pay taxes actually pay them. Sir Nixon, shall those workers who have very few years to retirement and are already settled still and be engaged in affordable housing funds? Fair question. Babu Michael, more taxes are being proposed but no clear accountability guidelines being set up, leave alone life being more unbearable. How sure are we that all these taxes will do what they are intended to do? I foresee a situation where new millionaires in town will emerge soon. Sawen, overtaxing the Mwananchi goes against Kenya Kwanza's campaign pledge of pesa mfukoni bottom up. Rather than asking for more money, it would have been wise to address corruption loopholes as we are losing money through corruption. Okay, and Dombori, you're saying housing funds may sound like a good idea. In theory, they often fall short in addressing the practical needs to a country's housing market. We need solutions that are evidence-based and take into account the complex socio-economic factors that contribute to housing affordability. And there's no better place to leave it at. Honorable Wandeto from Tetu, Honorable Loch from Mathare constituency, from Honorable Mboi from Kathiani, and also Honorable Ocheng from Ugenya constituency. Thank you all for making time for us of this conversation. And please go and make these presentations before the different... What is it? What did you just say?
We shall debate.
Shall reject.
We shall debate.
No debate.
We shall debate.
It's for rejection.
I think we need to explore other ways of raising revenues anyway.
Okay.
Wise people just discuss things. And
Okay. So two of them say reject.
Reject.
One saying debate. One saying look for different ways of looking for money. I think our day is done. Up next is Sporty Monday. Willis Raburu, I don't know whether he'll make it. He may not be very happy. The great Manchester United was not as great as... I'm sorry, I'm just stating facts. It is not me. I didn't play, actually. Honorable Check, I didn't play. It is not me. But we hope that he'll be here to talk about what just happened. Bye for now. My name is Sam Gituku.